ViacomCBS, partners across all consumer touchpoints that disrupt culture and utilize our iconic IP. Also joining us, Dayo Harewood, who is Vice President and Group Creative Director for Velocity at ViacomCBS. He leads the development and execution of co-branded content for multi-platform campaigns that span the ViacomCBS portfolio, including MTV, Nickelodeon, CMT, and Pop TV networks, as well as creating white label creative. And finally, Leslie Waters is the Senior Associate Brand Manager for Mars Wrigley, who led the Extra and ViacomCBS VMA partnership. The 2021 activation leaned into Extra's Fresh Start campaign, including a collaboration with Troye Sivan that brought both fans and consumers along the journey of safely reemerging into live music. Leslie has helped maintain Extra as the #1 brand in the category, leading the work to revitalize the gun category during COVID, strategic partnerships, and media activations to drive scale and relevance. Fun fact, Leslie is a certified jazzercise instructor and avid traveler. Please welcome Matt, Dayo, and Leslie.
Hey everyone, good morning. I didn't know that about you, Leslie, after all this prep. Maybe that's how we'll conclude. Today's session for everyone is about culture and authenticity. And as Toya said, with me today are my peer in Velocity, Dayo Harewood, who is our VP Group Creative Director and led our creative efforts and output for the Extra VMA campaign, as well as Leslie Waters, who Toya introduced, the Senior Associate Brand Manager and our incredible client partner, with whom we would not have been able to capture culture nor bring fans a big VMA music moment that both super served their passion of music and their interest in the gum category. And I know Toya quickly touched on this, but to ground everyone in the program details we're talking with you about today, we took inspiration from Extra's 2021 For When It's Time campaign, which launched in the spring of this past year and really focused on society's re-entry back into the world after a year of all of us in isolation. And in our extension of that campaign, we highlighted really the intertwined journey of musicians and fans as they headed back to live music. And our hero talent for their campaign were several. Music artist and queer icon Troye Sivan returning to live music and reigniting his connection to his domestic fans for the first time in over a year. Extra Gum, the reliable sidekick, and finally the shared fans of both, who were all culminating at a one-of-a-kind pre-VMA event courtesy of Extra Gum. This event served as the kickoff to our VMA campaign, which was then pulled through the weekend through original content and experiences across all consumer touchpoints, culminating in a big red carpet moment between Extra and Troye Sivan and a long-form piece of creative airing in the show. So our conversation today is going to utilize that campaign as the backdrop, but really be architected in 3 sections and takeaways that are applicable for all partners, advertisers, and the community here today. The first portion is about campaign development, including the approach to the briefing process, the shared marketing space we identified where each brand had an authentic role in targeting consumers, MTV, VMAs, as well as Extra Gum, and how we bridged entertainment to product and sales. Second section will be about creative criticals, the power of embracing change to create cultural resonance, and the importance of diversity in our storytelling. And then finally, authentic creative and how we arrived at it and it was achieved through this campaign. So we just wrapped the VMAs, feels like a lifetime ago, it was a month ago. We saw a number of partners this year, either launching campaigns, culminating campaigns, in some instances like Extra sort of optimizing campaigns. And Extra is really a partner who for years has collaborated with us on how the VMA serves as a true punctuation point in their master communication plan for the year, co-creating something that complements their efforts, but also feels unique and timely to the VMAs. So Leslie, I'm going to start with you. Let's go way back May and talk about how you approach briefing us such that we would architect something that really became an intrinsic part of your campaign at this key time.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much, Matt. I think as we approach the briefing process in general, it's really important to understand what our strategic objective is going in. I think Extra as a brand is really laser focused on understanding our consumer, right? And understanding our consumer needs, consumer desirability, and really at the end of the day, how that evolves. It's also really important for us, if I take a step back and I think about sort of the purpose of partnerships and collaborations, right? It's really about how do we make extra culturally relevant, specifically in this case with the VMAs. But most importantly, and I think once we create sort of a strategic framework, right, or a blueprint during the briefing process, it's also really important to allow for a certain level of flexibility and optimization, right? I think what we've learned in the past 5 years of partnering together, and obviously given the current environment, is that flexibility can really create opportunity at the end of the day. So if I think about 2021, as you mentioned earlier, Matt, so we launched our For When It's Time campaign for Extra in May. And really the campaign was leaning into the insight around the key cultural moment of reemerging back into society, right? As we think about what that looks like, obviously pre-Delta variant, as vaccines, were coming widely available. And really our messaging was twofold. It was one, we wanted to inspire optimism as we think about a post-pandemic world, obviously when we're ready, when it's time. But the second piece is really around sharing the realities and the struggles of what we've all gone through over the past year. And so I would say, first and foremost, it was really creating that cultural resonance. The second piece is really making sure that our category, right, was at the forefront of that conversation. And I think as we think about our category and gum in particular, it enables consumers to feel confident, right? And so we wanted to make sure that gum specifically had a role in that conversation as far as the reemergence back into society. And so it was really important for us to, again, capitalize on that cultural moment and really highlight the benefits of our category as well.
Matt, you're silent.
I think you're on silent. Yes.
You would think I'd re-entered back into society after all this time here, but I think that's really important to note, especially for people like Dayo and myself on the publisher side who ingest these RFPs all the time. And what you noted about the impact of the higher campaign, but then also the role of the product therein, specifically Extra within this campaign, was really important versus just a product briefing. And for partners who are briefing their publishing partners, a lot of times RFPs can focus solely on a product brief and not the overall campaign that it's a part of. And that was why we found success, because it was really important for us to be able to adapt that, but also respond to your brief rooted in identifying a common place that adapted your campaign about re-entering and coming back into society. And for us, and around the VMAs, that was really about music venues. Music venues were reopening in New York City. The show this year was grounded in Barclays. So that created like a really authentic access point for us to then co-market together and storytell together. We also then noted that the Broadway reopening was happening around the same time as the VMAs, the week of the 12th. And so that intertwined journey of musicians and fans both heading back to live music venues allowed us to then tell multiple stories, but also, broadened the sort of the earned media potential and the access point that consumers found into our storytelling, because fans of Broadway and live music were, searching for live music and where those reopenings were happening, and then by way found Extra Gum, VMAs, and what we were doing together. So, being able to identify not only that shared space, but tapping into a cultural event that wasn't just the VMAs, but again, the reopening of venues in Broadway around the kickoff to the VMAs was really important. And we really arrived at that thematic access point, and we needed to go to work on how we were then going to deliver on gum, selling gum product, the functionality thereof. We can entertain all day, but ultimately, Leslie's like, you guys need to sell some product for me. So, where was the connection point that you saw within the campaign once we identified, or the campaign development once we identified, okay, live music, re-entry back into society, VMAs, such that we were able to deliver on the product piece that was important to you?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a great question, and you're 100% right. At the end of the day, we do want to sell more gum, for sure. Yeah, it's funny, as you mentioned, we've had a long-standing collaboration and partnership with Viacom and the VMAs, and it's been an incredible journey. And I think that we've continued to evolve and we've continued to grow every year. And I think for this year in particular, obviously, we've been doing a tremendous amount, and I think I can speak for almost every marketer and every brand that we've been going through a year and a half of self-reflection, right? I think we've all self-reflected on the role of our brands in consumers' lives, how that's changed, the role of our categories in consumers' lives. And I think that opening up that conversation from the beginning within the partnership really helped us to develop something that really, uniquely fit into the Extra brand and also highlighted the role of the category, which is the most important. So I think for us, it was twofold for 2021, obviously focusing on the category, right? As I mentioned, we've done a tremendous amount of self-reflection, and if I'm honest, I think we all recognize that gum isn't necessarily the number one priority for consumers. But really, at the end of the day, our intention is to show how gum can play a valuable role in the everyday lives of our consumers and our fans. So if you think about the functional benefits of gum, right, which go above and beyond traditional freshening, it provides, mental boost. It helps focus. It really helps consumers feel more capable and confident. I think that was something that we really wanted to show within the creative specifically. I think the second piece is really all around cultural relevance, right? So, and in this case is how do we bring Extra to the forefront of pop culture? Right? The VMAs is one of the most iconic music events of the year. It's the epitome of pop culture. And if we think about sort of the key demographic, right, or one of the key demographics for the VMAs as the under 25s, it's a very, very important demographic for the Extra brand as we think about reaching and connecting with the younger consumer, as we think about recruitment. And at the end of the day, it was about creating messaging, right, that highlights the role of the category in a relevant and resonant way, that really brings Extra to the forefront of that conversation. And as far as highlighting the functional benefits in a way that feels relatable, right? And that is essentially shown through the creative. And I think those were the key components that were most important for us as far as we came up with a strategic alignment. Oh, Matt, I think you're on site.
For everybody on this, I think, as a brand, obviously the functional benefit is key to communication. But as an entertainment partner, especially when we're working on something like the VMAs, it's not a morning show. It's not your typical editorial platform where you can message that. And oftentimes, Dayo and myself will receive RFPs where it's about mentioning this, serum or complex formula within this product. And it's a hard connection point for us to bridge to then entertainment, back to music, our shows and VMAs. But ultimately, I think, when some of the stuff you were saying about the natural boost and focus, we arrived at this idea of the Extra gum being like the sidekick. Mm-hmm. And the sidekick not only, provided a functional benefit to the demo and the person that who was utilizing the product, but also then this really relatable and easily understood creative point that could show up in multiple ways. When you think about artists and you think about fans, it can be about pre-prep rituals before going into a big music event, waiting in line with your friends. Like there were a lot of moments where the sidekick could come to life. So that's where, for a tentpole like the VMAs, it was really critical to find like, what is that creative point that bridges the functional benefits you're trying to convey, but also can be relayed in an entertaining way. Mm-hmm. So Dayo, we noodled on the sidekick for a while. Can you talk a little bit about that idea and how that really helped inform our creative approach, our ability to illustrate the product benefits, that type of stuff?
Yeah, for sure. Well, I think, first of all, the great starting off point was that we have a great relationship with Leslie and her Extra team. So I think that we've already, through the years, had established, through our experiences of having worked on VMA campaigns with her before, a little bit of trust, right? And so this was a different moment, as she was explaining, that everybody has taken a step back and are kind of reevaluating their messaging and kind of where they stand with their audiences, where they stand with the people, their consumers, right? And so I think for us, we had to take a step back as well. And as you said, Matt, we wanted to look at like, where does Extra fit in with this culturally relevant moment where people are kind of assessing how they can kind of reemerge, out in public again, right? So with Extra, we were able to kind of look at their overall objectives holistically and culturally and kind of tap different parts of our teams to kind of surface what the cultural moments were that we could all relate to surrounding live music. Obviously, VMAs is kind of that touch point at the end of the summer. Music venues were starting to open up, and that's kind of where we decided to kind of land and play. And what, we really want to look at what the insights were coming from our team, data insights in terms of what were personal experiences and what were those salient experiences that feel close to the ground that we can use to tell our story, right? So what were the insights? How does Gum naturally fit within that frame? And how does it benefit and plus up our fans' lives in the moment? And so I think where we landed was, as you were saying, Matt, our audience is really reemerging into this moment where they get to experience a communal experience by enjoying music again. Everybody's been enjoying it on TikTok or at home alone and listening to music in their own way. But now finally you get music fans who are able to kind of have this communal experience again. So from that point of view, it's like, what are you looking forward to do? Me and myself, I hadn't worn jeans for, over a year and a half. I hadn't used gum probably that much, but, getting back into the natural rhythm of being social again, it's like standing in line, waiting in those closed spaces, whether or not you're following these COVID protocols in what you're doing, but you're also enjoying gum. You're enjoying those things that you used to do when you get close to people and you're having that close social interaction. So we really wanted to play creatively in that space, not just from the fans' point of view, but also from the artist's point of view. And I think that was a big thing for us that we hit on, that we really wanted to talk about kind of what the fans were experiencing and what the artists were experiencing, and how did they share, how that theme of sharing those cultural moments, how does that come into play? Because again, for the VMAs, those artists hadn't been on tour for a year and a half as well. So that idea of everybody having this big communal experience really kind of lent itself to the thematic of where Extra wanted to go, which is that reemergence and connecting once again.
And that is absolutely what helped us bridge the product efficacy with entertainment, was identifying those usage states for the consumer and then putting a creative filter on it, the sidekick, and then the experiences that consumer would have. So it was translating, again, product benefits that could sometimes in media come off as commercial, but really coming through an entertainment filter. And that brought us then to our development. So I think, in summary, in terms of the campaign development, the key takeaways were, the impact of a campaign briefing and a product therein versus just a product briefing, as we talked about. Finding a shared space or a common place where the partners' equity can complement the campaign in the most authentic way. For us, it was shared music experiences and reopenings. And then, the final takeaway in the briefing stage is identifying what is that usage state and how does that translate to entertainment, or what is the communication device through which we are utilizing entertainment to talk to consumers versus a commercial message. So we get through all that, and then it's then now how do we build this, and what are we doing? And I said at the beginning, some of the campaign criticals were the power of embracing change to create cultural resonance as well as ensuring diverse storytelling. But let's start with embracing change, which everybody's fearful when when we partner together at the beginning. We come out of a briefing, it's like we've got the blueprint, we're ready to go. No one wants anything to change, just move very seamlessly down to the end game. But critical to this campaign was cultural resonance, and as Leslie mentioned earlier, Gen Z in this TikTok world where trending changes on a dime. We really needed to embrace change to seize on a moment. And not only did we need to do that, but environmental changes from the time we were briefed to the time we got into activation had really focused or forced us to refocus the storytelling as Delta variant change, sort of the idea of reentry and what our storytelling would be, because it was reentry with caution or reentry with safety. And not a lot of advertisers can weather change or plan optimization but we found that critical to the success of this campaign specifically, and shifting and changing on, on a weekly basis based on, what we were going to achieve. Leslie, can you talk a little bit about why, as a brand, how or why you were able to embrace change and why it's important amidst change, for that to be true to or critical to a campaign's success?
Yeah, absolutely. I think as everyone has alluded to earlier, I think what has been so important and so vital in this partnership is creating that foundation of trust and understanding, right? So I think again, because we have that foundation built and we have that strategic framework of what we're trying to achieve with the partnership, and there's a level of understanding of what has changed year over year, how the category is evolving. I think because we have that foundation and we have that relationship, and we all had the mutual understanding that we needed to be flexible because we have been flexible in the past. And obviously we're in a very unique situation where the environment is changing, media is changing, the category is changing, consumer desirability is changing almost on a daily basis. So I think there was that mutual understanding that we needed to get to that point where, we were able to pivot as needed. And I think that was really important. So I think that first and foremost, it's really having that strong foundation. I think the second piece of it is just ensuring that, all the creative work that we're producing and the decisions that we're making are really grounded and rooted in insights, right? And I think Dayo, you mentioned this earlier. And it's not necessarily just category insights. It's, again, consumer insights. It's how our consumer occasions, consumer behavior is changing and evolving. It's also how media is evolving, right? Because a very, very vital part of our partnership is the media amplification, right? And this obviously is one of the most iconic music events. And as you spoke to earlier, Matt, if you think about, the power of TikTok and social media, I think what we've been able to do over the past couple of years is really evolve with the evolving dynamics of the media landscape as well, in collaboration with you all, your knowledge, obviously our fantastic agency partners, Mediacom and many others. I think we've been able to really understand where and how media is getting consumed, so that we're really ensuring that not only our creative is on point, right, as far as the changing environment and the changing, again, desirability from a consumer standpoint, but also that we are really meeting consumers where they are from a media perspective, where we're focusing on the right tactics. So I would say, again, it's that level of trust, it's that foundation, that strategic framework. And then the second piece of it, obviously, is just ensuring that everything, we're doing collectively as a team is rooted in insights.
That's so helpful for this audience, I think, to hear, because as marketers, we go through multiple phases that are based on assumptions or risks or predictions. Mm-hmm. And from a sales and marketing point of view at ViacomCBS, we start from a place of a framework that, we think that this will work out this way, or we take bets and we come up with talent recommendations and a full framework to align on the sale, and then go into development, and all of those things, continue to change. So weathering that change is important. The biggest one that can detonate a whole program is then always talent, within a tentpole environment or really within any program. And it's the one I'm always like, okay, we've got this creative concept, we're all aligned, and now we bring it to talent and it's completely blown up and changes. And it isn't always the worst thing. It is actually a really good thing, and what ladders back into our, our headline of authenticity. And that's a huge part of the creative development, is ultimately, going through the talent filter and how the campaign pivots and changes based on their truth and the vision they're bringing it. So Dayo, Troy was our hero talent, and the storytelling components of what we were trying to achieve changed, through his own truth. And can you talk a little bit about, the importance of us, of marketers, to embrace that within the storytelling to truly achieve authenticity in what we're doing?
Yeah, for sure. Well, I take it right back to something that Leslie said a little bit earlier, that we kind of had built a foundation with Extra in previous campaigns, knowing that we kind of knew their voice and knew their objectives. We really sat and we listened. I think that's really important. We listened kind of to what they overall were trying to achieve. So as you said, with different talent, you really have to dig into what their story is. And so Extra was kind of gracious enough to go along with the ride for us because we changed talent a number of times. And when we finally settled on Troye Sivan, I think what was interesting is that we had drawn the broad strokes of our creative in terms of, communicating what it was like to reemerge from COVID and from being locked down and not being able to tour. And he really gravitated towards the story of like how he had been isolated, right? And so that isolation, that universal story of being isolated and not being able to communicate with your audience in the way that you're used to. He has a very close connection with his super fans, people who really dig into his music and really feel seen by the music that he's putting out. And specifically because he's LGBTQ, he's telling not only a universal story when we got into the creative about how he was able to keep close contact with his fans, but also that, extreme isolation that some of his LGBTQ plus fans were feeling in isolation, right? And so through that story that he gave us, we were able to kind of expand and take this kind of macro universal story of everyone who had been kind of alone or not able to kind of have those shared experiences like we'd all been craving for a year and a half, and then even filter it through his experience, even down to a micro level, and really get super specific with speaking to him, but also communicating and translating that experience with his audience as well. So I think what we were able to do, again, holistically looking at what the campaign was and how Extra was the sidekick in those moments, then tell a very specific creative story about what it was like for him to finally reemerge and connect with his audience in a very kind of emotional way. I think that really helped inform and bolster the creative idea that we originally had. And so every step of the way, we were communicating with Extra, like, this isn't necessarily your cookie cutter pop artist. He has a very specific story to tell. And one that I think resonates not only with our fans on a broader level, but definitely even more so specifically to a very, a smaller slice of our audience and our fans that maybe felt like, oh, wow, you really see me, you really appreciate who I am and what, not only my experience, but musically, you get that like this artist is really hot right now, just pure fact that he's a great artist, but that you also see me in the experience that we're having this universal moment, but also that a very specific slice of it is happening to me on a different level and on a deeper level.
100%. And as we unpacked, Troy's story, what we found, and this goes back to the idea of sort of campaign change and optimization, is that the hit song that was on radio play was You, between Troy and Tate McRae. They'd actually never met. They had recorded it in different continents, and he was coming to the States, and by way of Extra, we were going to unite them actually for the first time ever at this big pre-VMA event, which then, became the start of this big cultural moment for us. Troy was coming, he's going to be at the VMAs, the Met Gala, but this big piece of the kickoff was then this reentry back into society, because we waited and sort of optimized closer and closer to the event, landed in on Troy, uncovered, pieces of his truth and storytelling that we wanted. And part of that was like, he's never met Tate, so let's unite them, which we did around the event, to incredible success. And I think that, the key takeaway from this section is really about, when developing the campaign, it's important to have your blueprint, but allow for flexibility and optimization, because change really does create opportunities, and too many guardrails are going to make the ultimate execution too rigid. And in execution, what was also, a campaign critical, and this is sort of a bridge into section 2 and 3, the campaign critical was making sure that we were truly grounded in diverse storytelling that was absolutely authentic to that community, which had, both an external and internal approach. But, diversity for Extra as a brand was hugely important to Leslie. So, do you want to speak a little bit about, the critical of that within your overall brand ethos, but also in the campaign that we developed together?
Yeah, absolutely. I think at the end of the day, diversity is really table stakes for most brands, right? It also, I think, can be a very I don't want to say tense topic, but I know that diversity has come to light in a big way from a society standpoint. I think when I take a step back and I think about what Extra's vision and focus and voice, I would say, around diversity is really around the inclusion piece of it. And it's all about how we authentically connect with our wide consumer base. I think that's most important at the end of the day. I think we try to look at diversity from a variety of angles. And what I will say, to give props to both of my partners joining me today, is that what I think is so special about this partnership is that you guys continue to push us every year, which is just a really wonderful thing. And, you know, as I think about as a brand, I think we're always trying to push the boundaries. We're always trying to think outside the box, but that can be scary and that can be daunting, right? And I think, again, when you have a team that has that level of trust and collaboration, I think you end up getting to a place that can be, you know, and in this case was really beautiful. If I think about Troy, and obviously we looked at a very diverse artist candidate pool, you know, I think Troy, in a lot of ways, just felt like the right fit. He felt like the right fit from a brand perspective. Not only does he have close ties to the LGBTQ plus community as we think about diversity, he also has a very diverse fan base. And I like to say he is authentically and unapologetically himself. So I had the absolute privilege of seeing him perform live in person and also working with him virtually. And there is just such a level of authenticity that he brings that is so relatable to his fans. I mean, I remember just even watching him through a screen, and you just felt his charisma, and you felt his emotion. And to your point, Dayo, I think his story helped to evolve our overall creative in such a phenomenal way. And I think what came to light, to your point, is as we think about what everyone has gone through from a society standpoint over the past year, there have been, you know, quite a few groups that have been, you know, very, very heavily impacted by COVID. You know, the LGBTQ plus community specifically in terms of isolation. And, you know, I think through the creative and through working with Troy, fans were, as to your point, Dayo, even, you know, specific groups of fans, but really everybody was able to see themselves through this shared story and this shared vision, which was just so powerful. And I think it created, again, that sort of that intersection that created connection as we created the story together between fans and artists. And I think you just felt that so much from Troy. And there was such a connection back to how we think about Extra from an authenticity standpoint, and how, you know, it's really all about self-expression and being your authentic self, right? That's what we try to promote as a brand. And I think that came to life in just such a vibrant way.
And it was absolutely evident in the creative output, but also as important, and we're talking about some of the insights that we used as well as talent filters to arrive at Troy and ultimately our creative, but as equally important was the creative input and the approach to the creative that we took in making sure that diverse voices authenticated the creative execution. Dayo, you know, you were critical in sort of the management and execution of getting to our output and making sure that creative input was heard in a meaningful way. Can you talk a little bit about the approach we took, as well as how that sort of established a process for velocity moving forward?
Yeah, for sure. I think that we felt very comfortable in our relationship with Leslie and Extra,